Okay, hi guys, I'm Jackie and I'm a team member of the Final Push. Today we are going to present our study called The Effect of Online Proctored Examinations on Self-Perceived Anxiety Levels. For a breakdown of our presentation, I'm going to start with the introduction and then hand it off to Adam to go over the method section. Kevin will be doing the results and then Tejas is going to close us out with our discussion. Just kind of for a general purpose and a background, obviously throughout this past year, COVID-19 has redefined every aspect of our life, especially education. And with the recent push and almost requirement to go to online classes, professors want to be super mindful for students when they design their syllabi. And one study that we looked at in particular saw that 58% of students were moderately or extremely concerned with their mental health for the fall semester. So what our study is looking to do is see if there's a causal relationship between exam proctoring and state anxiety levels. For our background research, we broke this down into two parts. Our first part of research was focused on state trait anxiety, and our second part was focused on proctored versus non-proctoring examinations. So for the state trait anxiety, Spellberger in 1983 created a 40-item state trait anxiety inventory. However, this is not feasible to give our participants in the time constraints we did have. So instead, we found a Martu and Becker 6-item state anxiety scale, which was derived from this 40-item scale. And how that was done is that they had 5 groups, each with 6 different of those items, and solely looked to see which one measured the anxiety best. For the proctored versus non-proctored exams, which was the bulk of our research, we saw a pretty big hole in that a lot of the research was done on the performance on the exams and not necessarily the stress that was possibly induced. So Daffin and Jones conducted a study on the same psychology class and concluded that performance improved on unproctored exams by 20%. However, when they went to go do the analysis, they couldn't determine if the increase came from a reduction of stress or an increase in cheating. Along the same lines, Hollister also saw that performance improved on unproctored exams and really wanted to look at the larger prevalence of cheating. So they looked at patterns of overall GPAs, homework completion, homework performance, and test performance. And then through statistical analysis of looking at these different factors, there is still no indication of cheating behavior. So just based on these two studies alone, we can see that there is that gap, and we were hoping our study would be able to fill that gap. So for the variables for our study, we had 2 independent variables and 1 dependent variable. The first independent variable was the exam proctoring, which had 2 levels, proctored versus non-proctored. The second independent variable was experience with proctored exams. So our 2 levels was more experienced and less experienced students. So a more experienced student is going to have 4 more classes with online proctoring under their belt, and a less experienced student is going to have 3 or fewer classes with online proctoring. And then our dependent variable is state anxiety, which we measured using a pre- and post-test method with a 6-item state anxiety scale, which Adam is definitely going to be explaining more later. And kind of to conclude the introduction section, I'm going to present our 3 hypotheses. Our first hypothesis was students in proctored exam environments will report a higher level of stress during the exam as opposed to those in non-proctored exam environments. Our second hypothesis was students with more experience with proctored exams will report a lower stress level than those with less online experience. And then our last hypothesis was students with more experience with online testing will be less stressed in both a proctored and an unproctored test setting. So that's it for the introduction. I'm going to pass it off to Adam to go over the methods.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about how we actually went through testing those hypotheses, starting with how we gathered our participants and also the materials used. So we used a convenient sample of 20 research methods students at Georgia Tech taking this class during the fall 2020 semester. Of that group, 75% were female, 25% were male. We also had a pretty decent distribution across different grade levels. So we had 3 fifth years, 6 seniors, 5 juniors, 5 sophomores, and 1 freshman. Now, we expect to have fewer freshmen considering this is generally a second year class. Now, for the measures used, we used, as Jackie previously mentioned, the 6-item state anxiety inventory by Marteau and Becker to measure our dependent variable. We also used a single-item self-report measure for prior experience with online proctoring, and then decided the high and low categories using a median split. Now, the SAI-6 has been tested by other researchers and found to correlate very strongly with Spielberger's original STAI for state inventory. So we felt very confident in using it for this testing. We also created a mock exam using 21 questions and 3 passages from an SAT practice reading exam provided by the College Board's website. We did not score this exam for accuracy, but we did tell participants that it would be scored for accuracy and that the top 3 scorers would receive $20 Amazon gift cards. So that deception we then revealed later. Let's talk a little bit about the procedure and design of this experiment. So we used a 2x2 between subjects design to conduct the experiment. Exam proctoring method, again, has 2 levels, proctored and unproctored. In the proctored condition, students would sit facing a camera with their microphone on and screen sharing using a Blue Jeans meeting while they took the exam. In the unproctored condition, they would take the exam at their own pace, but in both cases, they were limited to 15 minutes for the exam. We also looked at the prior experience, as I spoke about previously, in that high and low category. So those are all between subjects and tested using a pre-test, post-test procedure. Participants took demographic questions first, then reported their prior experience as part of that. They also completed the PSYC evaluation for the pre-test before taking the exam. They had 15 minutes to complete that examination. Whether they completed it or not, it would auto-advance after 15 minutes. Then we delivered the PSYC post-examinations and debriefed to make sure that we informed them that the Amazon gift cards were actually a deception and that we did not actually score any of the exams to begin with. So that's the method. That's how we went through and did this experiment. I'll have Kevin talk a little bit about the results of that now.
Yeah, so when we were analyzing the results of our data, we needed to first figure out what type of test should be run. Our study consisted of 2 categorical between subjects independent variables. These were the presence or absence of proctoring and whether or not participants had former experience with online proctored exams. We also only had 1 dependent variable, which was measured on a continuous scale. This variable was the mean difference in state anxiety from the pre and post test. This meant that we had a 2x2 factorial design, which lent itself to being analyzed by a one-way analysis of variance or ANOVA test. After running these tests, if you go to the next slide, we examined if there were significant results for any of our 3 hypotheses. Our first hypothesis of the main effect of proctoring on state anxiety did not yield a significant effect. Similarly, our hypothesis of a main effect of experience on state anxiety did not yield any significant results. Finally, we examined whether there was a significant interaction effect of proctoring and experience on state anxiety to verify our third hypothesis. This also did not end up yielding any significant results. Due to the lack of these results for all 3 hypotheses, we had no need to run any post-hoc analysis. And then the next slide, this figure is a representation of the interaction effect of the 2 independent variables on the one dependent variable, and as you can see, the 2 lines trend together and thus do not show any significant interaction effect. And I'll hand it over to Tejas to talk about the discussion.
Hey everyone, so as we conclude our presentation, I thought we should revisit our 3 hypotheses. So our first main hypothesis was that students in the proctored exam group will report higher state anxiety levels as compared to those in the non-proctored exam group. Our second hypothesis was that students with more proctored exam experience will report lower state anxiety levels as compared to those with less proctored exam experience. Finally, our third interaction hypothesis is that the effect of experience will be greater in reducing anxiety in the proctored exam group as opposed to the non-proctored exam group. And while our methods found that we had general trends to support our hypothesis, there was no significant evidence to support these, so we couldn't draw any conclusions. Next slide. Some of the strengths of our study was that we achieved a good simulation of the at-home test environment with our non-proctored exam group. Especially nowadays, many students are taking these exams at home at their own leisure and on their own time. And we believe that our non-proctored exam accurately depicted that same scenario. Additionally, we believe that our exam questions accurately measured our dependent variable and induced a general anxiety level. Since we took SAT-style exam questions, which are general aptitude questions, participants would not be able to, answer questions that are in their subject area of expertise, and this helped us standardize our results. Now, some of the limitations of our study was that we had a weak manipulation of the independent variables due to circumstances. For one, it was unfeasible to have random assignments. On the day of the exam proctoring, we had to use convenience sampling, and in that, we only had 3 students in the non-proctored exam group. Additionally, we believe that participants may have been insensitive to the proctoring methods because we had a third-party researcher monitor the participants while they were taking the exam, and not traditional software like we would see in a typical classroom scenario. Some of the future directions of our study is that we want to replicate this study with a larger sample size and actually do random assignment. The random assignment and larger sample size will help us generalize our results to a greater population. Additionally, we want to use a software proctoring instead of third-party proctoring like a researcher. This helps us increase reliability and objectivity in our proctoring methods. Finally, we think it would be interesting to measure state anxiety across different subject areas like math, sciences, etc. And this would help us draw conclusions as to how participants respond to stress when they're presented with exams that are in their area of expertise. To wrap up, I want to recap that we found no significant evidence to support our initial 3 hypotheses. We did find important insight into the relationship between remote learning and mental well-being, especially given the circumstances we're in now. It's important for students and professors to consider the effects that exam proctoring can have on students. Finally, we believe our study is important in assessing the legitimacy of proctored exams. Specifically, does proctoring really offer benefit to both parties, or is it creating a scenario that is benefiting the professor and not benefiting the student? And with that, we conclude our presentation for today, and we'd like to thank you all for your time.